I'm appropriately drinking out of my Zoom bottle tonight.
I think I know where you got that.
Yes, I think you do, Rod.
All I have is a Yeti cup.
Yours is probably fancier than mine. You shouldn't feel bad.
Your guys' mugs get around. I know it's hard to tell, but that's Zardy Dog.
Aww. That was a historical portrait of Zardy as what was it, Richard III or Henry III? I forget.
Eric, we have a quorum. Hank never picked up his binder, and I had talked with Harry this afternoon and sent him the link. I don't know if he's having issues getting on, but
Okay.
He hasn't messaged me, and he was texting me earlier. So
Great. So we have Bob, Andrew, Heather, myself, Trisha. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, why don't we get started then? Okay, let's call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Let's see. Trisha, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Everybody, please rise and right hand over the heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Michelle, can we have roll call?
Chairman Leach,
Present.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Here.
Commissioner Lothar, he's here. Commissioner Gaitis,
Here.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
and Commissioner Truxillo and Commissioner Bakta are absent.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is public comment. Notice to the public, this time is set aside to receive public comment on matters not calendared on the agenda. We do have a separate public hearing for the one calendared agenda item tonight. So save any comments for that until we get to that part. When recognized, we request that you state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Under California law, the Planning Commission is prohibited from generally discussing or taking action on items not included in the agenda. However, the Commission may briefly respond to comments or questions from members of the public. Therefore, we will listen to all public comment, but not generally discuss the matter or take action on it. So if you would, if anyone is present in the meeting and you'd like to make a public comment during the meeting, please use the hand raising feature of Zoom and we'll recognize you and turn on your audio. Any public comments submitted to publicworks@cityofbishop.com at this point will be sent to the commissioners, but won't be read aloud during the meeting. So with that, let us open the public comment period. Michelle, do we have anyone who wants to make a comment?
Chairman Leach, we do not have anyone. No emails and no one waiting with raised hand.
Okay, then I will move that we close the public comment period. I think we probably officially still need a second and a vote.
I'll second.
Okay, Michelle, can we have a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar, Commissioner Gaitis,
Yep.
Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
Motion passes to close the public hearing.
Okay, moving on then to approval of minutes. Minutes of the Planning Commission meeting held on September 28th, 2021. subject for approval. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second that. Michelle, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lynn, or Vice Chairman Lynn, sorry,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Chairman Leach.
Yes.
Motion approved for the Planning Commission meeting minutes held on September 28, 2021, approved as written.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Then we will move on to our one agenda item tonight, which is the proposed ordinance adopting changes to Title 16 subdivisions and Title 17 zoning relating to the implementation of Senate Bill 9 for the creation of 2 residential units per single family zoned lot. And we will start with the public hearing. And Elaine, do you want to introduce this before we open the public hearing?
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you and good evening, commissioners. I appreciate you all being here this evening. This item is in regards to an ordinance that would make changes to our subdivision code and our zoning code in the Bishop Municipal Code, consistent with SB 9 or Senate Bill 9. SB 9 was signed into law by Gavin Newsom on September 16th of this year, and it will come into effect on January 1st of 2022. It allows, it requires for municipalities to allow up to 2 residential units in all single family zone properties and to ministerially approve the subdivision of a single family zoned property into 2 lots. And so what that means is that typically we go through a subdivision process now that would require planning commission approval and city council approval under our municipal code to ensure, among other things, that it meets the development standards of our municipal code. The state law supersedes that, and the subdivision of a single family zoned lot would be approved at a staff level without going to the planning commission for approval in the future. This legislation supersedes the Bishop Municipal Code in many ways, and the city has very limited authority or flexibility to make modifications as the development standards are presented in the legislation. And so the ordinance that was presented for your consideration this evening is largely consistent with the text of SB 9. But for your information, what this legislation allows for is, again, 2 residential units on any single family zone property, and for any single family zone property to be split into 2 properties that should be approximately the same size and no smaller than 1,200 square feet. There are certain instances in which a property could not be subdivided, and that includes if the property is a designated state or city historic landmark or within a historic district, if it is prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance, if the property contains wetlands, if the property is within a very high fire severity zone, if the property is within a hazardous waste site or a delineated earthquake fault zone, if the property is within the 100-year FEMA flood map boundary, or if the property is habitat for state or federally protected species. And there were a few of those provisions that don't apply within the city of Bishop. We don't really have farmland of statewide importance that's been designated as such. And those properties within Bishop are not within very high severity zones. However, staff has chose to leave those provisions in just because it is a good check for us as we're going through any forthcoming applications to make sure that we're making sure that we're consistent with that state law. Additionally, the lot split may not apply to, it may not require the demolition of any deed restricted units or any housing that has been occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years. This ordinance and the state law also remove the setback requirements for existing structures so they would be consistent with the provisions of ADUs currently, which is that they can be converted into housing or structure can be rebuilt to the same location and dimensions as an existing structure. For any new construction, the setback requirement would be 4 feet for the side yard and rear yard setbacks, but front yard setbacks would still apply. That is also consistent with our existing ADU ordinance. This ordinance would reduce the minimum lot frontage to 12 feet to provide for a driveway, so that you could subdivide a property so that the majority of the frontage of one lot is on the street, and then there's a separate lot in the back that is accessed by that 12-foot driveway. The ordinance only requires 1 parking space for the newly created property. This is one place, and I apologize, there's a typo in my staff report. This is one provision where the city does have some discretionary authority that we can require that parking space to be covered. The city cannot put into place any objective zoning standards or design review standards that would preclude the construction of 2 units, or that would result in a unit size of less than 800 square feet. And the city may not require correction of non-conforming structures or zoning provisions as a condition of the lot split. The application will require the property owner to sign and record an affidavit saying that they intend to occupy one of the housing units as their primary residence for at least 3 years. And the lot split will not be allowed to be used for short-term rentals. With regards to general plan consistency and zoning code consistency, those are typical findings the Planning Commission would need to make for consideration of an ordinance. I think it could be safely argued that the city of Bishop has a housing need, as does much of the rest of the state, and I think our general plan supports that. In that sense, I think this ordinance is consistent with the general plan. There are many places in which the proposed ordinance is not consistent with our existing single-family ordinance. We do have a ordinance in place that allows for ADUs that is consistent with state law as well. So in practice, a single-family zoned property can already apply for a second dwelling unit on that property. I think that the bigger deviation from our code is with regards to the lot splits. As I said, this ordinance would allow for lots to be subdivided if you're creating 2 lots that are approximately the same size. They can be subdivided to as small as 1,200 square feet. Currently, the minimum lot size allowed for single-family zoning is 5,000 square feet. As I mentioned, this would allow for what's known as a flag lot, where there's a narrow driveway to access the larger lot. In our code currently, the average width is required to be 50 feet. Also, our side yard setback is 5 feet, but as previously mentioned, the ordinance as proposed is consistent with the ADU ordinance and allowing for a 4-foot side yard and rear yard setback. As I mentioned in my introduction, this legislation really removes much of the city's authority to change the standards that have been presented in the legislation and in the ordinance. The ordinance that has been drafted is consistent with the legislation. In instances where, like 2 instances where the city had some discretion to put objective standards in place, we did. One of them was that 12-foot driveway requirement, and which was what we could allow, and the other is that the parking can't be tandem. The Planning Commission could advise that the parking be covered if that is your preference. In drafting the ordinance in partnership with our council, our legal counsel, staff requested clarification on the street frontages to see if we could require a larger frontage, or if there's any discretion of the city to increase the minimum lot size. Neither of those instances applied, and so we can't change them at this time. It is possible that the legislation may be modified before coming into effect, or even potentially after coming into effect next year, since I think that there's going to be some concern in interpreting it across the state. But at this time, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution making the recommendation to the City Council to adopt the ordinance that adopts changes to Title 16 subdivisions and Title 17 zoning relating to the implementation of SB 9 for the creation of 2 residential lots, units per lot. That concludes my overview of the ordinance and the legislation for this evening, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. And we'll ask for any quick clarifications from commissioners, and then we'll open the public hearing, but save detailed conversation until the public hearing is closed, which I think will be quickly since I don't see any other attendees. Are there any quick clarifications first?
I think this is quick clarification, and Elaine, I think you answered this in your introduction, but I just wanted to confirm my understanding of the difference between the current ADU ordinance and this proposed ordinance. Are ADUs in Bishop, are those typically on a single parcel, whereas this ordinance would allow parcels to be subdivided and 2 separate units on 2 separate parcels?
Yes, thank you. That's an excellent clarification, and that's accurate.
Thank you.
Elaine, is there
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
is there a possibility that we can make the permanent residence permanent instead of a 3-year, and or make the short term longer than the 30 or 31 days?
I will refer to Mr. Collins on our ability to make it permanent housing. The definition of short-term rental is under 30 days. And so I think that's just the standard definition, unfortunately.
Okay.
What's the question, Mr. Lothrop, on the permanent residency?
Well, if the owner has to reside in one of the units for at least 3 years on a permanent basis, could it be a longer period of time?
I don't see why we couldn't make it 5 years. We certainly can't require somebody to live in a home and never move. That's certainly beyond the authority of the city, but I don't know that there's a legal or meaningful distinction between 3 years and a slightly larger amount.
Okay, just more for clarification.
Okay, and Elaine, I had one quick clarifying question. You said that the ordinance would allow the subdivided property to have 1 parking space. You mean 1 parking space per unit? So if you were to subdivide an existing property, each one would require 1 parking spot.
You know, that is a good point of clarification. I would assume
Okay.
that is what was meant in there, but
It's certainly consistent with, like, when I read through the actual proposal,
Thank you.
It seemed pretty clear that that's what was intended.
okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then with that, let's open the public hearing so that the public has an opportunity to make any comments before we move on in any more detailed discussion. Michelle, do we have any comments by email? Since I don't see any attendees on the meeting.
Chairman Leach, no comments have been received by email, or there are no one in the attendees.
Okay. Then I will move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Can we have a vote, Michelle?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta.
Yes, madam.
Motion approved to close the public hearing at 6:19.
Okay. Then let us move on to commission discussion on the agenda item. Elaine, was there anything else you wanted to add before we proceed?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Can I ask a clarification then? When we say that the new residential units created under SB 9 may not be used for short-term rentals less than 30 days, Does that mean that they are forever ineligible for short-term rentals, or that the owner can apply for an Airbnb permit? Sorry, I guess if you subdivide it and they're independent properties, then they can't be Airbnb. But if you built a second unit on your property without subdividing, that would fall under the existing ADU ordinance. Is that right?
You know, I had interpreted it to mean that you couldn't do any short-term rentals if you're taking advantage of this legislation. I don't know if Mr. Collins has more information about the intent of the legislation.
The bill doesn't speak to short-term rentals. The ordinance, whatever local ordinance is in place would apply. I don't know off the top of my head if Bishop prohibits short-term rentals like many agencies do.
Bishop doesn't prohibit it, but you have to live on the property if you're going to rent short-term.
Then those ordinances would certainly still be enforceable in light of this new bill.
Okay. And the short-term rentals are by application only. It's not automatic.
And that's, you have to be, there's no Airbnb, Eric? I thought for some reason that there was
No.
about 5 of them.
No, you can Airbnb provided that it is your primary residence. So you can't be a second homeowner and Airbnb a house that you don't live in.
But I can Airbnb my house and go to Italy for a month.
Sure, if you can, but only if you apply to the city for an Airbnb permit, and then there's a process by which your neighbors can object, and the city can either, grant it to you or they can deny it.
Correct. And then on the parking, it was my understanding that on page 4 of the, I guess, staff report portion of our thing, when it comes to parking, it says off-street parking shall be limited to 1 tandem space per unit. I don't know that it says that they have to have 2 spaces per person or per 1 space per unit. Where is that? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. I'm just trying to find where it
I
is.
didn't see it, or I might have missed it.
Page 4, number 6 of the ordinance.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, off-street
Per unit.
parking shall be limited to 1 non-tandem space per
Shall be
unit.
limited. That doesn't mean that it shall be 1 space per unit.
Well, I read that as there has to be at least 1 space.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I think they could get away with 1 space for 2 units.
Um,
What it's saying is,
I would agree with Chairman Leach that because I think that per unit provision implies that you would need at least 1 per unit, but also not more than 1 per unit.
yeah, correct. I mean, when it says limited, if it said shall be 1 non-tandem space, then I would be all right with it. But when it says limited, that makes me a little nervous, just as when I'm reading it, what I see.
I would be fine to add language, add that at least 1 space will be required, at least 1, but not more than. We could change that language for clarity.
Yeah, I agree, Elaine, with your interpretation. The current language says that you can have more than 1 parking space per unit, and I don't think we intend that.
Chairman Leach, if it may return to your question about the short-term rentals, I might have to find it again. It says it's under the section about the affidavit, which is helpful for enforcing that provision.
Can you point me to the page?
I'm sorry, I had it and then I left it.
Okay.
It's on page 10. So it is any unit that is created pursuant to the lot split cannot be used for a short-term rental, and that is part of the affidavit that the property owner would be signing.
Okay.
I have a question. But that's only limited to that person that's created it, right? I mean, how are we going to keep track of when that house sells? And
This is true that after the 3-year or the 5-year provision, it's actually, that's not true. With regards to the lot split, it says in here that that is going to be the use of the property.
All the real estate agents know that. And people selling their property or getting ready to develop a second dwelling, because I think that would have a huge impact in my property. You know what I'm saying? My property management, my own home.
I mean, I read the intent of this law as, you know, they don't want to incentivize existing property owners to just everybody subdivide their property so they can Airbnb the second unit. So, you know, you'd be signing an affidavit that as long as you own the property, you're not going to Airbnb it. And if it changes hands, then presumably whatever rules govern Airbnb in that, you know, in your municipality would take over. Is that also your interpretation, Keith?
Yeah, there's pretty established consensus among municipal attorneys and planners that this is going to be very difficult to enforce, these affidavits. And it's just kind of understood.
Okay. But the affidavit is our only mechanism for establishing that.
That's right.
That legality. Okay. Sorry, is there more discussion about that? I had a quick correction, Elaine. Page 1 of the ordinance says, whereas SB 9 takes effect on January 1st, 2021, that should read 2022.
Thank you.
I had a general question about the conditions laid out in, you know, section 1, for example, regarding the size of the parcels, regarding, you know, I guess parking. Can any of these clauses be appealed via, you know, the usual sort of variance or, you know, conditional use permit processes, or does this supersede that? This says you can't do any of these things. Like the property must be 1,200 square feet. They couldn't then appeal to the planning commission, for example, and say, you know, can I do 800 square feet?
I don't think, I mean, they could, I suppose, apply for a variance, but at that point, I think anything under 1,200 square feet is not consistent with either this ordinance or our municipal ordinance governing the underlying zoning.
All right, so then this is just laying out the minimum requirements you would have to meet for it to be automatically approved or approved by staff. And any deviation from this would come before the planning commission. And then if it weren't consistent with our code, we would presumably deny it.
Yeah.
Could I ask, are there a lot of properties, say, near the high school that would not be able to subdivide the lot? Because even if there's, say, 4,500 feet or 5,000 square feet, the houses are so tight you can't get a driveway in place to make a flag lot, and they may not have rear access from an alleyway. So does that moot those properties?
There will be properties that the design or the development standards here and the minimum requirements would still, you know, be prohibitive enough that they would not be able to subdivide.
Especially if you're requiring one space per unit.
Or if the existing house is situated on the property such a way that you would not be able to subdivide and meet that minimum 1,200 square feet, or the requirement that they're approximately similar in size.
And this would only apply to R1 zoning as it exists in town at the moment?
Correct.
Elaine, I had a question about the section 6A in, I guess, under section 1. So on page 4, when it says the parcel is located within 1.5 mile walking distance of either a high quality transit corridor, this pertains to the parking requirements. So these are the exceptions to those parking requirements, or a major transit stop. And I was wondering, do we have zones that qualify by that definition?
No.
Okay. Okay. Incidentally, in B, just below there on page 5, it says there was a car share vehicle located within 1 block of the parcel. Did the language mean locate, like vehicle rental location, or?
Yes.
Okay, we should probably just tweak that. I had another question on page 6. Under subheading I, just before section 2, it says the provisions of this section supersede any contrary provisions of the XX municipal code to the contrary. That's just a placeholder, I'm
I
assuming?
apologize. Yeah, that should
Okay,
probably say Title 17.
okay,
Or I'm sorry, the Bishop Municipal Code. We can change that.
okay. Another small correction on page 10. Under heading H at the bottom of the page, provisions of section supersede any contrary provisions in the Bishop Municipal Code to the contrary. So there's a duplication there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I had a question, which was not a simple correction. At the top of that page where it talks about for residential units connected to an on-site wastewater treatment system, the applicant provides percolation test, et cetera. I was curious whether there are any exceptions to, this ordinance, like either on individual properties where there might be, and I don't think we have these in city limits, individual properties where there are wells, and if you were to subdivide it, you couldn't guarantee a water supply to both houses. And I was wondering more generally if SB 9 provides any exceptions to municipalities where the water supply couldn't support, say doubling your population if everybody were to overnight, subdivide their properties and increase the population density.
I would refer to Mr. Collins on this, but I think that's one of the concerns that I've heard across the state is that the analysis of impacts this would have on existing infrastructure is maybe not been thoroughly considered.
Yeah, the new bill is silent as to those concerns. I think they're assuming that we won't have a wave of applications that would cause that type of strain, but no, the bill is silent as to those impacts.
Okay.
There is SB 10 too, which seems to be still on the docket in Sacramento, which seems to address some of the, I guess, environmental impacts of SB 9. And locally, I think what we would have to consider is sort of, in addition to water, sewer concerns.
There are a lot of things. Classroom sizes come to mind. Many infrastructure and supportive community type facilities, whether or not we'd be able to double Bishop's population and have enough teachers.
I think realistically in the short term though, we have a housing shortage and people are sitting on, so we have such a housing shortage. We are wanting to bring in more quality employees, say for the hospital, for the agencies, and they're not able to house their employees. So people are turning down jobs. I don't know that there are that many single family homeowners who live on the properties who have necessarily, I don't know that there's a slew of us who happen to be homeowners who have enough capital just to snap our fingers and put another home plus an ADU and transform Bishop overnight into an overly dense municipality.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly the Planning Commission tonight is not being asked to solve all of Bishop's future problems. And, we have limited ability to, this is a state law, which we're required to adopt in one form or another. I would just want I just wanted some clarification about if these concerns come up in the future, or specific concerns relating to a specific property. Say there's a property with a well, and if you were to subdivide it, there's not enough water in that well for both people. Could the city decline the request on that basis? Like, do we have the tools that we need to on a case by case basis make those decisions? I mean, this ordinance doesn't preclude any of those considerations, does it? And I guess that's directed at Keith, really.
No, it doesn't. It just says that we have to ministerially approve applications that fall within this narrowly defined criteria.
Okay.
Regardless of the impacts that it may have on the infrastructure.
Okay. Are there other comments from commissioners? Okay. Then do we have a motion to approve recommending this resolution to the City Council with the corrections we've discussed so far?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Keith, do we need a formalized statement of that motion, or is it clear?
No, it's clear what you're moving, and then we'll do the normal vote.
Okay, great. Then Michelle, can we have a vote?
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn, Commissioner Bakta,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Chairman Leach.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved. For the proposed ordinance related to the implementation of Senate Bill 9 for the creation of 2 residential units per lot, provide input to staff regarding the proposed ordinance, and adopt the resolution recommending adoption of an ordinance adopting changes to Title 16 subdivisions and Title 17 zoning relating to the implementation of Senate Bill 9 for the creation of 2 residential units per lot by title only, with the corrections noted. And this is a recommendation to the City Council, right? Keith?
Yes.
Okay, thank you then. With that, we will move to staff and commission reports. Elaine, would you take it away?
Good evening, commissioners. I only have one report this evening, which is that per your request, I reached out to the Inyo County Planning Department and requested they provide a presentation of their housing element update. They're not able to attend this evening, but they plan to provide that presentation at our next Planning Commission meeting.
Thanks for that update, and thanks for reaching out. Appreciate that. Any reports from commissioners?
I got a general question. Either Michelle or Elaine know anything about the old Joseph Market? Is any progress going on in that place? Or I noticed they were working a while ago, but any idea what is going on there?
They continue to make progress on their remodel, and I've heard reports that they're stocking, but that's the extent of my knowledge on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kmart,
Yeah.
is that what, Harry? Is it the
No.
Kmart building?
No, he's asking about the Josephs on Main Street.
Oh, because I was curious about the Kmart building. Last 2 nights ago, there was no parking lights on outside, but there was lights on the outside of the old Kmart building. I just thought it was a little strange. I don't know if they had a short or something, but it was dark in those parking lots.
You talking about the old Kmart building, or the new old
Talking
Kmart
about
building?
the newest old Kmart building.
Okay.
It was dark. I was just curious if somebody, because I did see too that it looked like hopefully maybe, I mean, where are we at with requiring negligent property managers or owners cleaning things up in their absence?
We have adopted that ordinance some time ago, and the city is working with the Kmart building on a regular basis to enforce it.
Okay, because that side lot too on the other side of Bonds, man.
The
Ooh.
Kmart building the owners have done a pretty good job of their cleanup. The lot you're talking about, Heather, we were assuming ownership of that lot from the county records, but found the records are wrong. And we just found the owners of that lot and have been communicating with them. And they're supposed to be sending someone in to clean up that lot in the next few days.
Which lot?
The one on the other
Next,
side
the
of
one
Bonds.
next door to Bonds?
Yes,
On the south side of Bonds? Okay,
yes.
okay. Yeah, that's become a real campsite. That whole area right there.
Well, also, if I'm not mistaken, the nuisance ordinance is, that the city adopted a while ago. It's up to us to report nuisances, right? It's not up to the city to go look for them. So Heather, if you have specific concerns, please call them into the city, and that'll initiate the process for the city contacting those landlords and pursuing changes.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, and then my second question, I do have a quick question, is where are we at in regards to, I know it's part of some of it is part of the downtown specific plan, but where are we at in regards to sidewalks? We're missing a lot of sidewalks in my neighborhood and in the area. I'm not specifically my street, but like down Sierra, is Sierra gonna get touched at all for sidewalks?
So this is really more a question for the Public Works Department, but sidewalks are funded as we have the funding available for street improvements.
I can provide an answer not on the Sierra, but we requested a congressional earmark for the Warren Street, Lagoon Street route to school project. And that funding request has been approved by the House and is now before the Senate. So we'll see if that gets funded, but that's one that, if it's funded, will be done in the next year or so.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for all the updates. Any other comments before we adjourn?
Elaine, you mentioned, or I read somewhere for the downtown development, the email has been sent to the Planning Commission, but I have not received nothing, the development, what is going on.
I will resend that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then if there are no further comments, we will adjourn this meeting of the Planning Commission at 6:44 p.m.
Okay, thank you for attending. We'll see you next month.
Thanks to city staff and commissioners.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.